What is political correctness, and how does it lead to gun control? We are constantly hearing the term politically correct, or PC, but what does that even mean? Well, let's break down the word. Politics comes from the Greek word politikos, which means of, for, or relating to citizens or city. So the term political correctness, in a sense, is the correction of citizens. So, who defines what is politically correct? Well, Google defines it as the avoidance of forms of expression or action that are perceived to exclude, marginalize, or insult groups of people who are socially disadvantaged or discriminated against. But where does this phrase come from? Although in 1793 the phrase politically correct was used in a judgment by the U.S. Supreme Court, it was used in a political lawsuit and didn't have the same meaning. It actually wasn't used again until the mid-20th century. And this is where it gets interesting. The phrase politically correct was used against the Communist Party by the Socialists. American educator Herbert Cole, who is best known for his support of progressive alternative education, wrote, "The term politically correct was used disparagingly to refer to someone whose loyalty to the Communist Party line overrode compassion and led to bad politics. It was used by socialists against communists, and was meant to separate out socialists who believed in egalitarian moral ideas from dogmatic communists, who would advocate and defend party positions regardless of their moral substance." So the term politically correct was actually used by the socialists to undermine and destroy the Communist Party by becoming the police of morality. When I think of socialism, one of the last things I think about is a society with high morals. But how did it come to the United States? Well, it actually started in the 60s and 70s on college campuses. There were so many different groups and cliques that to be a part of one of these, you had to believe a certain way. There were party lines. Kids would use the term politically incorrect or that's not politically correct as a way to push their group's philosophy and demean another. This was, in essence, a bullying term and used to shut down any opposing thought. By the 1990s, it still wasn't widespread until a New York Times article by Richard Bernstein, which discussed the rise of the term PC. Prior to this article, Nexus Citations reveal only 70 total citations in articles to political correctness. By 1991, there were 1,532 citations, and by 1994, there were over 7,000 citations. Listen to President George H.W. Bush during a commencement speech at University of Michigan in 1991.
The freedom to speak one's mind, that may be the most fundamental and deeply revered of all our liberties. Americans, to debate, to say what we think, because you see, it separates good ideas from bad. It defines and cultivates the diversity upon which our national greatness rests. It tears off the ignorance, the blinders of ignorance and prejudice, and lets us move on to greater things. Ironically, on the 200th anniversary of our Bill of Rights, we find free speech under assault throughout the United States, including on some college campuses. The notion of political correctness has ignited controversy across the land. And although the movement arises from the laudable desire to sweep away the debris of racism and sexism and hatred, it replaces old prejudice with new ones. It declares certain topics off limits, certain expression off limits, even certain gestures off limits.
Even President Barack Obama has spoken against being PC during an Iowa town hall meeting in 2015.
Now, one thing I do want to point out is it's not just sometimes folks who are mad that colleges are too liberal that have a problem. Sometimes, there are folks on college campuses who are liberal and maybe even agree with me on a bunch of issues who sometimes aren't listening to the other side. And that's a problem too. I was just talking to a friend of mine about this. I've heard some college campuses where they don't want to have a guest speaker who, is too conservative. Or they don't want to read a book if it has language that is offensive to African Americans or somehow sends a demeaning signal towards women. And, I got to tell you, I don't agree with that either. I don't agree that when you become students at colleges, have to be coddled and protected from different points of view. I think that you should be able to, you should invite anybody who comes to speak to you and you disagree with, you should have an argument with them. But you shouldn't silence them by saying you can't come because, I'm too sensitive to hear what you have to say. That's not the way we learn either. So, what do you think, Arnie? Amen. He said amen. All right. Okay.
In 1992, Herbert Kohl, now remember, a progressive, said the people who promoted the use of the term politically correct in the early 1990s were former Communist Party members, and, as a result, familiar with the Marxist use of the phrase. He argued that in doing so, they intended to insinuate that egalitarian democratic ideas are actually authoritarian, orthodox, and communist influence. In today's society, it isn't politically correct to teach the true history of the United States. We do not focus on the brave men and women who have died establishing this great nation. Rather, we are teaching the young to demonize those founders by calling them racists, bigots, and savages. They teach us about the evilness of our country, but leave out the victories of the past. Let me give you an example. Instead of teaching about the 99% of the people in the United States that didn't own slaves, they pushed the 1% that did. Instead of pushing that over 250,000 men died and 2 million more fought for the freedom of all people, they only preached the bad. Instead of sharing in the pride of saving the world in World War I and World War II, we pushed the anger of Vietnam. It is very important to know and understand what we did wrong. But it is more important to see how we overcame together. All people, all races, all of us as one. But what political correctness has done is separate the people into different groups and cliques, similar to the 60s and 70s. These groups and cliques refused to listen to others and continued to demonize opposing thoughts. The majority of the people in this nation, regardless of race, are not racist. They don't hate me nor you because of the color of our skin. The majority of people don't care what sex you are attracted to and who you spend the night with. The majority of Christians don't preach that you're going to hell for committing a sin. The problem that we face is extremism, caused by political correctness. These few people are being pushed over the edge because they are being taught to be offended by everything and hate all opposing ideas. These few are the ones getting media and political attention. We are being overpowered by such a small group of people. But why? Why is it when we turn on the news do we constantly hear about race, gun violence, religion, and sexuality? If you consistently preach hate to a society, then hate overwhelms certain individuals. Let us for 1 second pretend to be the leaders of these United States. Let us also pretend to want complete control of the people. How do we accomplish this? With over 300 million people in this country and approximately 88 guns for every 100 citizens, even with our 1.4 million man military and all the technology that we have, we cannot overpower the people unless they are disarmed. Let us now forget about a government takeover. With 88 guns to 100 citizens, do you think Russia will invade? China? No. The citizens are the last line of defense. They will protect me, and they will protect you. Do not forget, it was not the military that won the Revolutionary War. It was the citizens rising up to fight for our freedom. So I ask this question. What if the politically correct society is purposely being manufactured so that the elite can pass gun control laws? And like always, thanks for watching, and please subscribe.